Greetings, Darklings. From across the interweb, it is once again I, the Duchess, Precious Ken, here for the Sounds and Shadows podcast. And I have an exciting guest. We're not doing a band today. And I love that. I love when we get a chance to step outside the box and talk to somebody with a different perspective in the scene, because there's so much that makes this scene happen, whether it's DJs or promoters or public relations figures or just super fans that help promote music and care about it. I will also give a shout out because I am rocking today my Ayatoya Rebel t-shirt. We gave Anya a shout out the other day, has a single currently on our Dark Scene singles chart. But the guest I have with me today is a member of both the writing team, promotions of Negative Gain record label, which we all know I'm a huge fan of, a lot of bands I love on Negative Gain, as well as doing written pieces in a fellow Michigander, the Detroit area. It is my pleasure to welcome Konstantina Buhalis. Did I butcher it after I even practiced your last name?
No, that was perfect. You did such a good job. Proud of you. Perfect. Spot on.
Thank you. It's great to have you here, and we have a ton to talk about. I feel like, because I follow Negative Gain, a lot of bands on there, which to me is a label that has one of the coolest, most eclectic grouping of bands. It's not a post-punk label or a goth label, or it really is all over the dark scene in terms of the people that they bring in and put together to play. So I'm excited to talk about that. But first, to start out, tell me a little bit about how you got into this and how you found it. Because as we talked about just before the interview, I have a couple of years on you. And often the goth scene really does get wrapped up in nostalgia. And you're not Robert Smith or fucking Andrew Aldrich or, the sisters, then fuck you. And there is this attitude out there. And it's so important that we let new blood and new excitement into the scene. So I always love to hear a person that came onto it a little bit later, but just has such a vast understanding and grasp of the scene and the music. What got you into it?
Well, first of all, before I answer the question, I want to thank you so much for having me on. This is such a pleasure and such an honor. I'm a big fan of the podcast, so I'm really excited to be here. But to answer the question, it all started when I was born. No, when I...
You came flying out of the womb with an intricate knowledge of the Mission's B-side singles. You were that person?
Yes.
Lovely.
But oddly enough, it all kind of started during my ballet days. And that sounds kind of silly, but
no, I'm very intrigued.
Growing up, I was really into ballet and theater and dancing, and I spent the majority of my childhood and my adolescence and my teenage years on stage and performing. But when we were in rehearsals or we were just doing practices and conditioning and tech and whatnot, one of my teachers would sometimes play Depeche Mode, and I just fell in love with it. And it was this sound. I was young, so I was about like maybe 12, 13, 14. And I just remember every once in a while he would put Depeche Mode on. And I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever heard in my life. Because at the time I was growing up with a lot of the 2000s emo music, and you had done the special on My Chemical Romance, which was one of the bands of my youth. To give you an idea of what I was listening to at the time. And so Depeche Mode was so different from everything that I had heard before that I was just fascinated, and I wanted to know more and I wanted to hear more. And so in the very beginning of like the YouTube algorithm and kind of the suggested videos, I found my way through, I guess, the levels of goth music, I guess you could say, kind of
Sure.
starting with Depeche Mode, more like synth pop. But we kept finding our way through there. And a lot of it too came from mall goth as well. Listening to Evanescence. I really love
Right.
Amy Lee. She has such a gorgeous voice. Um,
That band
and
slaps though.
so I love
Evanescence
her so
slaps.
much. She is so her voice is so incredible, and so much of her music is just so beautiful and vast. But a lot of my interest kind of came from that, and even My Chemical Romance, which wasn't necessarily cited as a goth band, but they were on the darker end of emo. And as a
And the
young person,
pageantry in the video you talk. That's
yeah,
another thing. When you
that was
talk
it
about
too. Yeah.
capturing the energy of goth, they cared about.
Yes.
Goth is big on pageantry. Like the
Exactly. Yeah.
giant
Yeah.
black candles, frilly cuffs, all that
Mm-hmm.
shit. It's extra. And My Chemical Romance grasp that energy.
Absolutely. And that's what drew me to it. And as somebody who was involved with theater and ballet, and I was wearing, the big tutus, and I would see, in my back in my youth, calling them like the older girls, I would see them sometimes in their tiaras and their makeup and their point shoes. And there was pageantry and there was this regality to it. And I thought, oh my God, this is the most beautiful thing in the world. And every once in a while, you'd see the girl with the black tutu. And I was like, oh, wow, that's the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in the world. And so a lot of it came down to just not only the few bands that sort of introduced me to it, like Depeche Mode, Evanescence, My Chemical Romance, The Cure, but also just the aesthetics of it. And I wanted more. And I just fell in love with all of it. And I just kept digging deeper and deeper and deeper and just finding myself in this world of just this dark glamour, I guess you could
Yeah.
say.
No, for
And
sure.
I fell in love with
You
it.
definitely wouldn't be the first person to see Dave Gahan in a leather vest, whether you're 16 or 40, and think, now that's intriguing. I need to look
Yeah.
more deeply into that. I mean, he just had his like 63rd birthday the other day, and I
Yes.
saw a picture, and he's still wearing the vest, and I was like, dude, that's still daddy, like for sure. Like
Absolutely.
David Gahan stuff is what I'm driving. But so no, that's great, and I love that because sure, the aesthetic and the concept is what,
Mm-hmm.
as much as people try and act like it was some other way, I went through that too. When I was
Yeah.
16 in like 1992 or whatever, and sure, the look or the image or the idea of this brings you, but then you learn about the music and you find your way
Yeah,
into it from
absolutely.
there. And something else you said resonated with me because I remember I was in theater as well and in a play. And I think we were doing The Outsiders. I was Patrick Swayze.
Oh,
And
yeah, I love The Outsiders.
I went through a breakup with this person at the time. And so I spent a whole lot of time in my car in the parking lot at play rehearsal,
Mhm.
finding Sisters of Mercy, First, Last, and Always, and smoking a clove cigarette and watching my high school girlfriend with her new boyfriend. That was a big goth moment for me. It's just
Yeah,
looking from afar and
absolutely.
being like, I hear you calling
Yeah,
Marianne.
absolutely.
I think that's how
And
goth came for a
um
lot of us.
yeah, and I think a lot of it too came from I was always from the beginning, I've always loved reading and literature. And I remember growing up, I think I was in 3rd grade, so I was about 9 years old, and I remember bringing home, the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe from the library, and I put it down on the kitchen table, and my parents were like, "Oh, no. Here it is."
If she moves on to
That
Sylvia
and
Plath, we're really worried.
you're right.
Edgar Allan Poe's a
Ri
gateway.
exactly, Edgar Allan Poe, and then seeing the cool goth kids out front of the Kmart was, like, my gateway drug into goth music. Like I wish the Kmart was a joke, but it's not. That inspired my entire like introduction into goth music. I just associate goth and grunge music with Kmart.
Wow. Now that is a new perspective for me, and I love it. So you touched on something there that I think is interesting to the story that I want to get into again of how you found this. And your
Sure.
history going back before that is a really interesting story. And you were starting to tell me about, I spent so much time at Greektown when I was
Yeah.
young and growing, and I've always been enamored with the food. And Rachel and I got to travel to Athens and go to some goth clubs there. And what I saw there and is a big part of what led me to making Sounds and Shadows. And that lines up with your story as well as Detroit, which is another, or at least the East Side. I was from Clarkston, which I won't claim Detroit.
Yeah.
What led you there? Tell me a little bit about your early story and your history that set you on the path.
Sure. So, if we start from the very, very beginning, I was born in Bucharest. And if you know anything about Romania and Europe, obviously, there's a massive goth scene over there, and a lot of electronic and techno music is such a big part of the culture. And when I was born in the mid 90s, that was a big part of the cultural scene there. Obviously, I didn't get to partake as I was a infant, but I'd like to think that in some ways it's kind of in my blood. And when we came to the United States at the end of 1995, we were in Detroit. And obviously, again, Detroit has such a vast and beautiful history with electronic music, techno music, Motown, and of course with Greektown.
And City
And
Club.
so yeah, exactly. And so my family being Greek, we listened to a lot of traditional Greek music growing up, but we also listened to a lot of Motown as well. But in some ways, I'd like to think that kind of goth culture and I think sometimes Greek culture kind of intertwined in a lot of ways, because I grew up when it was still a little bit more traditional. And I remember sometimes I would see the yayas in the back of the church, the grandmothers wearing all black, and they had their candles, and they were visiting, and they were still holding the vigils for their husbands who had died like 20, 30 years ago. And you would get the pamphlets from the church, and you would see that they were still holding memorials for somebody who had died 100 years ago. And you'd look and you'd see the candles and the iconography, and everything was so intricate and detailed and beautiful. And there was always kind of this unwritten rule, and I would laugh that if you were over the age of 18 and you were at some sort of Greek function, you were probably wearing black. More than likely.
I've witnessed this phenomenon for sure.
Yeah, so you've seen it, and all my formal gowns that I wear to weddings are black. Like, and they ask me, isn't that bad luck? I was like, well, not if you're Greek, but but I think that was a part of it too, is there's just this I guess majesty that surrounds all of that, with everything just being so beautiful, and everything is always candlelit, and you've got these icons or pieces of art that are inspired by the Byzantine Empire, so everything is like jewel tones and gold, and everybody's kind of like wearing black, and it was just so aesthetically pleasing to me that I think that influenced not only my interest in the scene, but also I think just as a whole from like a fashion perspective as well. So I think that had a lot to do with it. And of course, traditional Greek music, rebetiko, or sometimes people might call it like taverna. The taverna being the like hotel bar that you would hang out at. But if you listen to a lot of those songs and you understand the language, a lot of them are a little sad. and it's
Oh,
songs about
very.
longing and, loss of love or wanting to go back to the country or missing your family and things like that. Um, and so, that inspired me, as well as, of course, the music of the Orthodox Church, the Gregorian
Oh,
chanting, which of course is very somber, but it's also very beautiful. And so there's so many different elements to it that inspired me
I tell
and
you what,
led me to be a Greek school dropout.
I love hearing that. And I'll tell you why. I always talk about the importance, like I said, of having new people come in and welcoming them and finding the scene. But when I hear your story, it feels so similar to when I had the same catharsis when I was the same age as you in the
Yeah.
late 80s, early 90s. But it was organic and felt the exact same as what you described 20 years later. And I love that people find this stuff at different times and different, but the core concepts that lead them there are so much the same in the tradition of it. So that's
Yeah,
gorgeous.
absolutely.
And I love it. So the next thing I want to ask you about is let's skip way ahead then. You get a chance and
Okay.
somehow became connected to Negative Gain Records. And
I
tell
did.
me how that happened and how you turned that as somebody who it is, I gotta say, hard, I imagine, for someone younger to break into a position of that kind of meaning for one of the major labels of this scene. And you did and found your way into it. How did that happen? And what did that feel like to be a part of it?
So it's kind of a funny story. It happened towards the end of 2020. So um, I don't think any of us could forget the pandemic was still very much part of our lives. We didn't have the vaccines or anything. So I was doing a lot of writing, or at least trying to write, and I was looking
Mhm.
for new avenues. Um, and I was covering a different genre, and I had realized, and I loved it, but I had realized I think I've kind of grown out of this.
What was the other
And
genre? Are you talking about like emo and things like that?
I was covering a lot of pop punk and
Okay.
emo, and I still love those genres a lot, but I had gotten to a point where I kind of felt like I had grown out of it a little bit. To It wasn't something that I felt passionate enough about covering
Yeah.
24/7 anymore. And
Yeah.
I still have a lot of love for that genre, but
I mean, I
you just
listened to
kind of change
Misfits
and you grow.
back in the day, but I don't anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um and you know I had this love for this genre forever, and it was one of the genres that I felt I had continued to grow with. um
Yeah.
and I was just going through Spotify, and I was listening to all this different music, and I was taking a lot of time to think, and I had gotten to a point where I said, I don't know if I want to continue to be a music journalist, in the sense that I'm always writing news pieces and, little blurbs for the website and things like that. I enjoyed it, but I said I want to do something that's closer related to the artist, which was always my main goal. I had always really wanted to work for a label. And I just kind of took the risk, and I found the contacts for Negative Gain, and I sent them an email. And in the email, I said, I'm a music journalist. I graduated with a journalism degree. So I said, I'm well versed in media law and like AP style. If that's something you're interested in, I'll make sure all the spelling's correct. And, I just kind of like listed qualifications that I had. And at the previous publication that I had been working at, I interviewed Maru. And when I did that interview, I knew that was kind of my signal. And I just knew for a fact, I was like, this is what I want to do. And so I kind of mentioned that in the email. I said, hey, I also interviewed this dark wave artist, Maru. And I said, I'm available if you need somebody to help keep up the website or whatever it is that you need, any kind of writing you need, I'm here. And oh God, like less than 8 hours later, Micah emailed me back, which I didn't think was going to happen. I didn't know how big the operation was. And I
Sure.
was really scared, and it was just kind of a blind email. And he got back to me. He was like, "Yeah, sure, let's have a chat."
I I
So
must have DM'd Micah at least 4 or 5 times before he ever gave a fuck about who I was, for sure. So good job on that. That was impressive.
thank you. And I was like hyperventilating on the other line of the email. I was like, "Oh my God, I didn't think I was gonna get this far. I wasn't expecting you to answer, and then so
Now I have to
quickly."
do something. Damn it.
Yeah, but it worked out, and I was just amazed. And then suddenly, like, this whole world opened up to me that I wasn't sure if it was completely closed off, because like you said, there is kind of a little bit of an age gap between
Sure.
me and then who mostly covers the scene. So I was a little bit nervous, and I said, "Oh, I don't know if that's going to be something that maybe doesn't translate well with
Well,
fans." But it ended up working out, and this November or October, it'll be 2 years at Negative Gain.
that's awesome.
So,
So
so
one of the big things to me that really put you on my radar when I saw it is you put together and were really largely responsible for a compilation on the written piece that they did, the Negative Game Productions magazine, issue 1, Women of Dark Electro. And you had several of my favorites here. Tell me a little bit about what that felt like, why it was important to you, and how you went about reaching out and choosing the performers.
So this kind of goes back even a little bit further, even before Negative Gain. And as I was getting into the space where I knew that this was the genre that I wanted to cover and that I knew I wanted to stay in, I was really thinking about how it felt like there weren't any American goth publications anymore. It kind of fell to the wayside, and I kept thinking about it, and I said, "Gosh, it's such a shame that those don't exist anymore." And I was doing a little bit of research, and I came across Synapse magazine, which only existed for a couple years. I want to say it was from 1976 until like 1978 or 79, and then the publication went under. Um, and I kept making jokes, and I said, if I ever come into a large sum of money, my goal is to buy Synapse, put it back into print, and restart it.
That's
And I bought Mega Millions tickets, and I came in second, so I didn't win any money. And um, Roger, that Christmas of 2020, I think it was, he had gotten a hold of me around Christmas time. And this was something that he had been thinking about too, and that he wanted to put together a magazine. And I said, "I'm in. Let's do it." I said, "I've been wanting to do this for a while." And when you're trying to do it yourself, it can be really hard to sort of get those resources together.
sure.
Um, and so he had suggested this, and I said, "Perfect timing. This is something that we both were really passionate about." And I want to say that Roger had kind of already come up with the list of who we wanted to feature.
Sure.
And he had asked me if I was comfortable with interviewing Grab Your Face Marie. And I had to like pretend I wasn't starstruck. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm cool with that."
They're such
um,
just an amazing human too, that just, I don't know, just has
yes,
wonderful star energy. I've gotten to interview them before, but also just cover,
yeah,
and every time we put out like a snippet or have them be song of the day or something, they always reach out to me and are excited and just like, "Oh my God, thank you, Kat." I'm like, "You're such a big deal anyway. Why are you talking to me?"
yeah, I know. And that's kind of how I felt. And again, I was kind of hyperventilating on the other end, and I was like, "Oh my God, I didn't think I was gonna get this far." And so Roger had asked me if I was comfortable with it, and I said, "Yeah, of course." And I interviewed Marie, I think right before Christmas, I want to say. Um, and we had such a good time together. I think we sat on the phone for 2 hours, and most of it was us just laughing and, like, giggling at jokes and talking
Yeah.
about what's on the internet and negative gain, but we had such a good time talking about the music, talking about the evolution of the scene and where they're at the time, where they were at the time. And Marie had come in to the label around the same time that I did.
Mhm.
So that was really cool because we both kind of had something in common there. We were both a little bit new to this, and we were both kind of learning the ropes. And Marie, if I remember correctly, also is a former critic as well. So we kind of
Yeah.
had that in common as well. Yeah, so we had all of these different layers of things that we had in common, which I think made for a really dynamic interview. And it's honestly one of my favorite interviews I've ever done. And then I found out that it was going to be the cover story, which is one of the first cover stories I ever did. And I think it was Maria's very first cover. So the both of us, we were kind of just like, we were both just like screaming. We were like, oh my God, can you believe it? And so it was cool. We both had the opportunity to kind of come up together at the same time, both on different ends of the spectrum. So it was a really cool experience, and I had so much fun with it. I was so nervous before we put it out, and then it ended up being, I think, Bandcamp's like best-selling compilation of the week or the month or whatever it was. So, I mean, I was just so proud.
I love everything about that story. And again, a part of it because, and I've talked to women who've been around in the scene a long time, but that's just it, is pretty young. I mean, to, come in and to get together, have that same perspective of two people that are an important part of this scene and telling each other's story and doing it for each other together and lifting each other up is just so badass with just no dude in the room. I fucking love it.
Exactly.
And getting to hear that story and have it come out without that being any part of the concept. I love that. You had a lot of other people besides Marie on that Coralex was on that, who I love. Goo Monday from Australia, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And a couple others I played at the time, but that I don't know personally that well. But I think it's amazing that this came out and that you got to cover it on this level. And I really hope that there's more things like this. I just did a written piece about compilations and what Cleopatra Records compilations meant to me.
Yes.
I got to have Amaranth on when I was like, dude, 16-year-old Ken is just like crying right now. I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah, exactly.
As somebody who came along, like I said, I mean, decades later, how were compilations a big deal to you and also a part of your evolution in the scene?
So it's funny because for me, the goth compilations didn't come until later, but I came up with emo compilations.
Okay.
And so picture it.
Sicily,
Lakeside,
1939.
Yeah. Yeah, like Sterling Heights, 2006.
It was the
Lakeside
worst of times. It was the worst.
It was absolutely the worst of times. But I had it was the worst of times, but I had like $20.
Topic. Yes.
I had like $20 from my mom, and and where there's a will, there's a way. And I don't know if you remember, but back in the day, sometimes when you would go shopping, they would throw compilations in your bag.
Yes.
So I remember PacSun was really big in that, and I think Hot Topic was too. But for some reason, I remember PacSun like really pushing that when I was younger, and they would throw compilations in your bag when you were done, buying your stuff. Yeah. And that was huge for me, but also just the music that they would play in the stores. And so, I shopped at Hot Topic and PacSun, and we'd walk around Abercrombie and, like look at the pictures on the walls and stuff. But you would hear the music they were playing, and a lot of those places kind of played the same style of music. There was that 2000s kind of SoCal West Coast emo. They were playing a lot of Dashboard Confessional, Say Anything, bands like that, where it kind of was almost like the colloquial language of teenage shopping and economy. And that is what sort of got me into the compilations. Yeah, isn't that, and I feel awful for people are like, how'd you get into that? And I'm like, shopping. And but that is very much the truth. And then when I would go into Hot Topic, I would see, they'd have the CDs, and then they'd have, t-shirts on the wall for bands that I wasn't really familiar with. But sometimes, you pick up the CD, or what I had a lot was homemade compilations. So friends would just make their playlists and burn them. And I have a couple CDs that I've kept from those years that were handmade compilations. One of them is like Christmas 2008 or something that one of my girlfriends at the time had given to me. And sometimes I'll just look at the track list and like pull it all up on Spotify and just laugh. But compilations for me, just as a whole, I always really loved them and appreciated them and enjoyed them. And they're kind of like the charcuterie board of music, I think. I think that's I feel like that's a really good metaphor for it, though, because you get so many tastes.
Yeah.
And
I might have a little
so
sausage here, a little cheese here on my cracker, but yeah, you get to try a little of everything.
Exactly. And I love that. Exactly. But I always loved compilations, and I think now I search out compilations almost a little bit more than I look for full albums, because I love having those little tastes, or the 3-4 minutes of 10 different bands. And then I can go forward and say, okay, so I really like this, and I wasn't crazy about that, but let me see what the rest of their album sounds like. And maybe it's me being like non-committal or something, but I like that.
I hear you. I feel that too.
I still have that same mindset that's like, oh, I don't want to commit to a whole album, as if I'm buying it, even though I have Spotify and I just play anything at my will.
Right.
But I think compilations are so incredibly important, and I listen to them all the time. I love the mixes that I find on YouTube where it's like 2 hours of just, like underground post-punk or super niche, like Russian, punk music or emo music, whatever it is. I love it.
See, I love that. And it's always so interesting to me, because I came from a time, like I said, where compilations to me, riding my bike up to the mini mall to get the latest Clio comp that came out once a month or what have you, was really kind of pre-internet in the way that, you kind of grew up with it and thought of it. There was no other way to learn about new bands if you were in the scene or into those zines, like you talked about, magazines, or people. That was all we had. And so I love hearing that from somebody who grew up their whole life at a time when you could get a new CD, like compilation, and just Google search that shit, and there you found out everything about them. You saw them on YouTube, all that stuff. Like, that was an option for me then. So I love the fact that still mattered to you and was important to you, even though you could have found it, like you said, another way. So yeah, that's really interesting. Tell me now, you did that comp, which is so awesome, and I will link here because everyone needs to check it out. what's the future now and what's next? You talked a bit about music journalism and writing, doing written piece and doing that and working with Negative Gain. But you also have said to me before, I remember the quote when we first discussed this interview, TikTok is going to be the future of music journalism. And other things like that, though, that I'm dipping a toe in as a 44-year-old white man. It's tough. It's a lot to face it. But I'm ready for that future, and I want to hear, what does that mean to you, and how is this going to be the future that brings the next generation of people excited about dark music into the scene?
So I grew up with social media. You know, I had MySpace when I was 11 or 12. I mean, I didn't really use it, but I had an account and I knew that it existed, and I knew that bands were on there and people were posting about these bands.
Sure.
And I grew up in the blog era, you know, and I remember growing through all of this, and I watched the evolution from the blog era to people trying to save, or, you know, I should say that in quote, like, save print. And I watched all of that. And as I was going through my undergrad, you know, as I was going through school, I was going through the evolution of that. So I started with my professors assuming we would all work in print, to suddenly, as I was graduating, they said, you're never going to step in a newsroom again. And I, and I knew that the internet was absolutely going to be the future in every single way, that, you know, entertainment and media was already existing. And we already saw it with MySpace, which was kind of already for people who are interested in music, and even YouTube, if you want to consider that social media, and people sharing their music, or, you know, uploading compilations or what have you. But with YouTube, the format, you could have it as long as you wanted. TikTok, you can either do 15, 60, or some people get 3 minutes, and now there's a new thing for 10 minutes that you can do with your videos. And so I kept saying that TikTok is the future, because I think with the interest in Y2K culture and blog culture, I think TikTok sort of melds both of those together. And so you have this background for a lot of people who are around my age and even a little bit younger, who remember the blog generation, who are bringing that to a media format, but they're able to condense their thoughts and ideas in 60 seconds or less. And that's such a talent, because I know I ramble and I end up doing 3-minute videos about something that could probably be said in 60 seconds or less. But I think that there's really a talent and an art to being able to produce these videos, give your critique, or even just suggest artists and albums that people can listen to. And they do it without even speaking. They'll do a video with text, and it'll be 15 minutes, and they'll be pointing, or they'll show screenshots of their Spotify playlists and say, this is what I'm listening to. Here's my public playlist. And so I think that it's the future of music journalism in a less formal aspect, but I like that. It feels more personal. It's more intimate. It's like sitting on the bus, or sitting in the school hallway next to your best friend, and they hand you their headphones or whatever, and they say, hey, you know, I just picked this up, or I heard it on the TV and I found it. Come and listen to this with me. And I love that. And it's so special, and it's so, I want to say, unique to the new social media that we have, because it's so interactive and you can respond to them. You can stitch the video, you can duet the video, you can comment to them. And I love that. And I see so many young people who just get on there, and they're not journalists, they're not media professionals, whatever, and they just want to talk about music, and they'd say, you know, I was listening to the new Mitski, and here's what I think this is about. And I read this interview with her, and I think this is why it all makes sense. And, you know, they have like the conspiracy theories about what the songs are about, you know, like with Taylor Swift, because I love her so much, and I get
Yeah.
a whole bunch of
I
videos
love
about
T
her.
Swift. T Swift's
Um,
badass.
and they have, all these videos about her, and I love it. And people are dissecting it like they're journalists, and they're giving these video essays about it. And I love it, and I love how passionate these people are, especially the young people. And I kind of laugh, and I'm like, your literature teachers would be so proud of you right now if they could see you.
I tell you what, Constantine, you've blown my mind just now. That was amazing. Because no, I say a lot, with somebody, like I said, who I want to find a way to broaden my perspective. I want to keep that door open. But one of the things I feel, and I've said on interviews before, especially people who've been in the scene a long time, is that one of the things I feel is missing sometimes is that when I was 16, 17, 20, we would go together, 8 human beings, take
Yeah.
out a record that just came out. There was a ritual. We took it out of the liner notes, placed it on the player, everyone dead silent. We had a drink, whatever, put the needle on, opened the liner notes together, looked at the art, read the lyrics. This was a ritual, and it was a thing that, kind of like you just talked about, put us in a communal headspace around music. And sometimes I feel like, hell, I'll go to a party with people younger than me or something, and there'll be 30 people there, and 20 of them will have in earbuds listening to their phone something different, instead of kind of interacting in the communal aspect of that. So I feel sometimes like that's a lost art, this sharing of music together. But I think I hadn't thought about it that much, that in this way, whether it's TikTok or, this is how people in their own time, in their own space, share the power of music together and talk about it and comment on it at the speed of sound, like each posting a TikTok of their conspiracy theory, their thought.
Yeah.
And I hadn't really thought of it from that standpoint, but what's the difference? Those two things in a lot of ways are exactly the same. They're just happening in different time, where someone posts the video, talks about it, then another person that is connecting them posts it. But in a lot of ways, it's wow. I have a lot to think about now.
I think one of my favorite examples of that, though, was when Taylor Swift released Red, Taylor's version, which was one of my favorite albums of hers. I was a senior in high school and it came out, so it's been with me for a very, very long time. But when she re-released it, and she re-released the All Too Well 10-minute version, I was so obsessed with TikTok at that moment, because she was doing so many things. She had released the song, she did the video, she did the Saturday Night Live performance. But I think it's one of my favorite examples of informal music journalism, because my entire feed across social media was people talking about it and dissecting it at the most atomic level.
Sure.
And I was so impressed. And I was just astounded by the sense of community that I was seeing online for this one specific, the whole album, of course, but the one specific song. And it felt like everybody in the world, or at least everyone who's a Swiftie, was united in just talking about that and what it meant to them, and what the song was at this point in her life, and her vocals and the music video. And it was just such a fun time to be a music fan. Like that one weekend, I was like, this is why I'm in the entertainment business, is for moments like this.
I love that too, because all the moments I described, where it was 8 of us sitting around a 70s sectional couch smoking clove cigarettes and putting on Pretty Hate Machine for the first time, we also had profound theories on the ultimate meaning of life. but all of those are lost in the grains of sand because we woke up after 4 bottles of wine, not remembering any of them in 1996. But all of yours are preserved for life and ours aren't. So there is a crystal beauty in that. I love that shit.
There really is, though, and I love it. And I'm so sentimental about it.
So we're coming up near the end here. And as a music review page, especially for someone like you that I feel has their finger on the pulse and, you know, with a record label and working with, you know about exciting new things going on. Tell me about 3 quick hits that our listeners at Sounds and Shadows need to know about that you're listening to now that have you fired up.
So, okay, this one isn't necessarily goth, but I really enjoyed
That's
this
okay.
one.
Whatever
It's the
you're into.
band it's the band Sulk, S-U-L-K, and they're from Michigan. Actually, they're from the Detroit area, I believe. And I went and saw them a couple weeks ago. They're a shoegaze band, and I've been obsessed with them since hearing them.
Where'd
I
you see them
love
play?
them.
Who'd they play with?
They played with the band Greet Death and Infant Island.
Okay.
Greet Death is also from Michigan. They're also like a slowcore shoegaze band, and then Infant Island, they were kind of like an emotive hardcore band. They were really fun. I enjoyed them a lot, but I think Sulk almost has a little bit of a goth vibe to it. They're a little bit more down tempo. They're very somber. They've got, you know, that awesome shoegaze tone, and it's just such, if you put your headphones in, it's just such an immersive experience. And then if you've got a newer iPhone, you can do that thing where you can do the noise canceling with the rain and everything, or like the white or black noise in the background. That changed my life, listening to it. Like, if you're looking to just completely disassociate, I highly recommend.
I was going to say, I
like,
think
the rain.
literally the thing you just suggested is the most blasphemous thing to a shoegaze band that I've ever heard, and I'm here for it. I love that. I could just picture our old guitarist who does a shoegaze band called Crash City Saints, rolling over in the grave he doesn't even have yet at the idea of noise in his wall of sound. I love it. I'm gonna do that to us right after this interview. That sounds awesome.
It's so good, but I think it's me just constantly needing like a barrage of sound at all times. But also a self plug, ESA's One Missed Call, that single. I may have done the vocals on that, so you might want to check that out.
All right, let's take a moment, because Jamie is a ridiculously attractive human. So I have to... Okay, and that single with the video for it, all of his videos, I've interviewed Jamie before, and the amount of thought and story and concept that goes into his video is staggering. The music is amazing. Honestly, if anybody ever asks me, Ken, what does EBM mean? Like, what should I ever hear? That's the first thing out of my mouth. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
To me, invented that shit in a lot of ways, or at least did the best incarnation of it that I've ever heard so far.
Yes, and I agree.
That video is a introspective, intelligent, terrifying, full-blown movie that belongs at Cannes Film Festival in the form of a fucking YouTube video, music video.
I had told him that, and it was really cool. I won't get too sidetracked because I know we're running out of time, but I had the opportunity to work with him through the entire process of not only the album, but also that music video. And originally, we were going to try and do it where I was kind of filming part of it myself as the lead of that, but it's really hard to film music videos cross continents. we found out, but I
there's
mean,
just so many things you have to match in terms of like the light.
Absolutely.
tiny details.
Absolutely. It's such a process, but I was able to be a part of the entire creative process through the whole thing, and I can say without a doubt, Jamie is completely brilliant when it comes to what influences him and, everything that goes into his work, and it was just really cool to be around all of that and experience it. So for any other artists, if
Wait,
Jamie ever
before
reaches
you,
out to you,
oh yeah.
say yes to working with him.
Before we move on, the other final Jamie shout out I have to give is he's been posting pictures lately of his fucking dog in a security center.
Candy.
I'm dead. Like
I
I'm
love Candy.
literally dead. I haven't had this much emotional resonance since I first started following Bannock, Anya Ayatoya's dog.
Yeah,
Are you
right.
following Bannock? Like, do you follow his Instagram?
I don't know if I follow the Instagram or not. I'm gonna have to check it out.
There's also a YouTube where Bannock sings industrial music. You really
Mhm.
get on that. It's next level. But Jamie's dog too.
I know. I love Candy. He's so cute.
All right, I'm sorry. I got
Candy.
waylaid there. Tell me about your final shout out you would like to give to a band or artist.
Okay, so this one is a little bit older, and I actually just came across it earlier this week. It's from 2016, but it's the band Fahrenheit 451, and it's the album House of
Ethan, I
Moral.
just interviewed Ethan. So freaking cool.
And so I finally just got around to listening to it because sometimes I tend to be a little bit slow moving sometimes. When you work for a label, sometimes you get so obsessed with the artist that you work with. I'm like a proud mom, and I just listen to all their music all the time and like force other people to listen to it. But yeah, I finally got around to listening to some of that, and I was like, oh, this is so good. And I just really enjoyed it, and it gave me, I think, the ultimate experience, in my opinion, of what I think a more trad goth sound
Yeah.
is. And I love that. I love where the scene is now, but I also love the bands who definitely kind of call upon the ancestors, if you will,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
bring that into their music, because it's so important to be able to honor and understand, the ancestors of, the goth and dark scene and where we came from, and being able to bring that into a modern landscape, I think is really quite a talent, and it can be quite a task too. And I think, a lot of artists do that so well. And I was just very impressed with this, and wanted to shout it out. So
I appreciate the more you get. And right now, I am like pushing down so hard on my 44-year-old white man urges to be like, let me tell you about Fahrenheit 451. Because, but you brought it up and talked about it. Ethan, actually, the compilation that we were talking about from Cleopatra, he's the one who
yes.
put that all together. And he started singing for Fahrenheit 451 in New York, I think when he was like 19. He was a bed.
Wow.
And that was in like the mid 80s that he was doing that he started, and has done so much other stuff, and with Cleo but just that was so interesting for me. And the other really cool thing on that comp, there is a cover from another Brooklyn band dear to my heart of Fahrenheit 451, where they kind of gave a tribute and shout out there doing a Fahrenheit 451 song. So I love that you did that. That was glorious.
That's perfect.
It is. So we're coming up near the end here. Is there anything else that you want to shout out that you have coming up in the future, whether it's something you're working on writing, something you're working on for negative gain, or your TikTok channel or doing journalism that you want to make people aware of here?
So I guess I am in the midst of a project with MTV, and we're going to be talking a little bit about goth culture in 2022. So I'm bringing goth back to MTV slowly but surely. And I'm really, really excited about that piece. So right now we're just in the developing stages, but keep your eyes open for that piece. And then, of course, for my TikTok, as always, I'm always open for people to come to me with topics or subjects they would like for me to talk about. My TikTok is not only where I practice my bad stand-up, but I also like to discuss things like music, and I also think it's important to be able to talk about social justice issues, not only in Detroit and Michigan, but also, you know, at a global scale as well. So if there's anything people want me to talk about, you know, feel free to shoot me a message on there or DM me. But yeah, I also write for Detroit Metro Times, so keep your eyes open for that. I interviewed Gary Newman for Metro Times a little while back, so, you know, if you've got the time, check out that feature because I really enjoyed it. And I guess the only thing I can say is if you want me to cover something, just shoot me a message or an email, and I will do my best to check it out and give you the story.
I grew up reading Metro Times in my formative years, so I'm very jealous that you get to do that. That is so awesome. It's been a true pleasure having you on here, Konstantina, and everyone should go check out whether it's TikTok or some of the written pieces. You definitely, I'm going to link that, but have to check out that compilation for negative gain. And I will take your recommendation here. We usually, when we have a band or artist on, we spin out to one of their songs, but how about we do that new electronic substance abuse track that you brought up that is on Negative Gain Records, and we will spin out to that because it is an absolute 12 out of 10 fucking banger. So for all of you out there in interweb land, this has been the Sounds and Shadows podcast with Konstantina, and keep it fucking dark, yeah.
It always comes down to you, doesn't it? Anytime I try to make something of myself, or I try to achieve something, somehow you always show up and you up for me. Everything I do, you destroy, and you ruin. And you laugh in my face when I cry, you stupid. And I'm so tired of you. You're rancid! And you're disgusting! And I can't take it anymore, and I just want you to stop!
message! This is a message.
It always comes down to you, doesn't it? Anytime I try to make something of myself, or I try to achieve something, somehow you always show up and you up for me. Everything I do, you destroy, and you ruin, and you laugh in my face when I cry, you stupid, and I'm so tired of you. You're rented! And you're disgusting! And I can't take it anymore, and I just want you to...
What? Hurts you the most? Hurts you the most?
Miss McQueen,
Yes.
my name is Michael, and I'm calling from the National Party. It seems there's been some recent developments with you.
Yes.
Good. Let's talk.
I'll be ready.